Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 106 of the Former Action Guys podcast. I'm your host, as always, Justin Kramer, and I have on again this week Blake Flannery, Recon Marine. Yeah, man, really good conversation. If you didn't hear us talk, or if you didn't hear us talk last time, go back to his previous episode, a few episodes back, and get the first part of his career where we talk about his time in boot camp, which most people are like, why would you want to hear boot camp stories and stuff like that? But Blake has a really interesting perspective because he went to boot camp prior to September 11th, and actually 9/11 occurred while he was in boot camp. So it's cool to hear that kind of like, holy shit, we went from peacetime Marine Corps to wartime, in that span of 3 months where he was at boot camp. So really cool perspective there. Went to SOI, hit the fleet with Alpha 1-5, spent some time training and stuff with those guys, and then took part in the invasion in Iraq. Came back from that and tried out for the stay platoon, went through the screener there, and then they got tapped to deploy again. And that's kind of where we got cut off in the last one with some technical issues and stuff like that. So if you haven't heard that episode, I would recommend going back and checking that out after you check out this live stream. And yeah, that's about it there. As always, make sure to check out my Instagram at Former Action Guys and at jkramergraphics. Both of those, my website's jkramergraphics.com. If you want to support the show, you can go on there and pick up a sticker, a mug, a hoodie like this one. Check it out. It's pretty sick. Yeah, that's really it for that. And then if you're popping in on the live stream, make sure to give the show a thumbs up and subscribe on YouTube. And yeah, that's really it. So let's go ahead and move on to Blake, man. Welcome back to the show. Appreciate you coming on, and we'll catch back or get back on to your story.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me back on.
No problem, dude. So where we left off was you were on your way, or you had just gotten to Iraq, and you were with the stay platoon going to Iraq, and you were talking about how there was a noticeable increase, or there was an actual, known danger now from like IEDs and stuff, which was not even a consideration during the invasion. I mean, did you guys even talk about possible mines or roadside bombs or anything like that prior to the push up to Baghdad?
For the invasion, mines were definitely a consideration because we expected as part of a conventional war, so a conventional barrier plan, we would expect mines. I don't remember anything specific for like the initial attack, but that was always a concern on some of the places that we stopped. It's like, hey, there's supposed to be an enemy defense here, and you guys are going to get out. And that was like literally all we knew. Like, There's no 5-paragraph order. It's just we're driving, and suddenly like people start shouting that we're going to make a left turn and attack something. So you're like, all right, cool. Hopefully there's not a barrier plan.
Yeah.
Didn't really encounter it. The only thing we really encountered was on the very first objective that we had is Alpha 1-5. I don't know if I mentioned the last one, but one of the guys blew off the front of his boot. I think he broke a bunch of bones in his foot, maybe shattered his ankle, but like no penetrating trauma, no bleeding. But he did get medevaced right then and there. So the war only lasted, a day for him. And there was no one was really sure what it was because none we had EOD techs or engineers doing kind of post blasts, and we figured it was either like a small anti-personnel mine or it might have been a cluster munition that he stepped on. But yeah, it definitely was not a huge thing. And then after, fighting our way most of the way to Baghdad in mop gear and getting to change over into camis, we're kind of like going back. It's like, all right, we're just going to deal with, assholes and rifles and machine guns, and they don't have artillery anymore. They don't have mortars anymore, kind of so we thought. And then we started getting reports about the IED threats and that they were using homemade rockets and mortars. We're like, okay, so a little bit different than what we expected. When we got into Iraq, we got to our FOB. It was, I think we changed it to FOB Mercury. We ripped out with 101st Airborne. They had it called something different, but we changed the name to FOB Mercury. It was attached to Camp Fallujah. That was like the big FOB in the area. But you couldn't go from one to the other. Like we always had to send convoys to go out and around for like laundry and PX runs and stuff like that. So it was a tiny little FOB, and it didn't even house the entire battalion. One of our companies manned the FOB that was by the Abu Ghraib prison.
Okay.
We had like a company reinforced that was like their home station. and it was Weapons and Alpha Company were on FOB Mercury, and I don't remember where Bravo Company had their home, if it was the same spot or not. But
now, prior to going, obviously the insurgency like kicked up. You guys said you started getting these reports about different kind of threats like IEDs and stuff like that. Did you fully appreciate like what an insurgency was? So I feel like prior to Iraq, most of the people from our generation probably has heard that word like insurgency, but it probably didn't click until some of us started going overseas and seeing what that actually meant.
Yeah, not really at all. The only things that really the closest we could think of come to mind were like stories from Vietnam. The Viet Cong fighting the jungle and then trying to melt back into the local populace in the small towns close by. But that was all we really knew of insurgency. And some of us knew about history, and obviously that was early 2000s. So the conflict in Northern Ireland that Britain had been dealing with, some of us had been watching news growing up, like we were kind of aware of that, but not to a great extent. Like I knew there was a problem. I didn't really know much about it. We did actually get a brief from a Royal Marine before we left Kuwait, and he talked to us about some of the IED tactics and insurgency tactics that the IRA used against Britain. But it was, I don't know, probably a 2-hour class, and he brought up like wearing electronic countermeasures, and we didn't have electronic countermeasures or anything like that. And just some things that he mentioned, I was like, I don't know if I want to be doing that kind of stuff, because I was really still concerned about being shot more than I was about, a goat on the side of the road stuffed with explosives. And everything was still command det for those guys in those earlier days.
Yeah.
And we got another class, or a brief really, when we got in by the Army guys who were ripping out with us. And generally their TTP was all command detonation. So they had a wire out to the charge, and there'd be a dude sitting off on the side of the road, like, 100, 200 yards off. And he would just be waiting there, because a lot of times they would do their post blast. They would be able to trace the wire or find the spot, and there'd be like a cluster of, food wrappers and water bottles. The guy had been sitting there for quite a while. But they would blast, and the Army's TTP in that area apparently just been like, once it goes, like, just floor it. Gun, get out of the kill zone, right? Get out of the kill zone. There weren't too many complex ambushes of IEDs preempting, small arms and RPG fire, but there were some. So that was their TTP. So what the Iraqis and the insurgents have been doing was they were just rolling up the wire, because as soon as they detonate the charge, the convoy's flooring it and getting out of the area. And there's no return fire. So they would just reel up the wire so they could use it again. And so I think, I don't want to fully give credit to the Marines if it's not due, or, but it was either a recent Army convoy or a Marine. I think it was Marine. I think it was 2-4 had decided, well, if they're sticking around to reel up the wire, then, turn vehicles in direction of the blast and start assaulting in that direction. And then when someone starts running away, there's your guy who set off the IED. So that kind of changed some of their TTPs, and it made it really difficult for them to use them against us, because now they realize that if they set off an IED, we're immediately looking for the trigger man to go after them. So that did prompt later on in that deployment. Alpha Company was driving up a road, and they just see some dude running from like the right-hand side, I think it was, just like running out, and he was trying to run out and throw out an IED in time to hit one of the vehicles in the convoy, and he got so excited, whatever, he ended up blowing himself up.
Oh my God.
On the side of the road. So I saw pictures, like the 7-ton front of the 7 just smattered in like bits of, blood and Iraqi.
So he was trying to throw a charge in front of the vehicle as they were rolling down the road?
Yeah, he was like just trying to run up and throw the charge out real quick so he could like run back and detonate it. I don't know, I guess he fell asleep on watch or something, but
Oh shit, they're here early. Oh.
Yeah, so their TTPs with it were really, really, really basic, low level. It wasn't a massive concern. We did get hit. One of the weapons company, the Cat Patrols, went out. They got hit with one, and the IED itself actually didn't do a lot of damage to the vehicle, but it sympathetically detonated the javelin that was attached to the outside of the Humvee. So that did some damage to the truck, but no one was seriously hurt.
Wow.
You know, we had all the crazy Mad Max armies now that we have to deal with this explosive threat, and we all identified that rolling around in unarmored Humvees in the invasion was kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
But now we have this like Mad Max armor. It's just like bolted and welded to the Humvees every which way, and the engines weren't necessarily prepared to take all that strain. So a lot of trucks were getting stuck, and it was weird, like lining the bottoms with sandbags and shit like that.
My buddy Hanthorne was telling me about doing the same kind of thing, having that kind of steel L armor that they would weld onto the doors, and then having sandbags and stuff, and then it just these crazy attempts at trying to protect a blast. That's pretty wild that you have not an actual up armored Humvee, but like a ghetto rigged Humvee that survived its javelin explosion. Like, I mean, that's kind of crazy. It didn't do more damage or hurt anybody in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Humvee was down from that point on, but I mean, they were able to drive it back.
Oh, jeez, there you go.
Yeah.
Now you've obviously done a lot of deployments, probably seen your fair share of IEDs and stuff like that. How were the IEDs at the very beginning like that? This is when the insurgency is really starting to realize that this is an effective tool to use against the military and stuff like that. How were the IEDs different then compared to like what you saw in the latter part of your career? Like, were they smaller? You already said they're less sophisticated. They're more like, dumbed down versions of it.
Yeah. So everything was command det back then. It was either command det or they had like homemade grenades. Mm-hmm. So they would try to drop those off of overpasses.
Yeah.
But not very sophisticated. Most of the charges weren't very big. The biggest key event that we knew about, and it was the first instance, is a daisy-chained 3 or 4, I think were Chinese 120 rounds. Okay. So that was like, holy shit, like they understand how to connect explosives, and obviously a daisy-chained bunch of artillery rounds in the ground. Now you have a much larger kill zone. But because they were so kind of primitive, I guess would be the best word for it, in like their initiating systems, there were a lot of failures, which is why we found out about it. They weren't really good at camouflaging a lot of the stuff that they did. Mm-hmm. There was a cement factory close by, and I don't know if they picked it up from the Chechens or the IRA, but they were starting to hide munitions in concrete. They will replace like a curb with this new cement block that has an artillery round in it.
Yep.
It's already primed in, ready to go, and then they would wait, and when a U.S. vehicle would drive by, they would detonate it. So that was really their TTPs, and the fact that it was all command detonated kind of made it easier for us, because that meant someone had to be watching, and a lot of the similar telltale signs that we see now, where the locals will probably avoid that spot. Concrete or pavement that looks newer than everything else, paint that looks fresher than everything else. But because they had to sit there and observe, anywhere there was line of sight, you were usually able to identify.
So we were talking about, what were we talking about when we got cut off there? Something about the bridge.
IED threat.
Yeah.
IED threat in general, yeah. So yeah, I was just saying that the same telltale signs that like we teach people to look for these days were there, but because they were like all command det, rather than victim operated or even radio operated. It made it a little bit easier to identify your potential triggermen because they had to be line of sight. They couldn't be that far because they're, command dead with firing wire. Like, you can only get so far based on how much wire you have and the amperage for it. So they were usually fairly close by, usually easy enough to identify. Mm-hmm. So when an IED did go off, it did make it easier to figure out where that's coming from, and then orient and basically counterattack and handle it. And that area was fairly open as well, so it was a lot easier to get off the roads. And again, because they were so fledgling in their tactics, they hadn't really mastered getting the IEDs in place like they have now, especially in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Afghanistan, I think, is way, way more dangerous IED threat than Iraq ever was.
I think a lot of guys that have spent, I mean, again, I was in TQ, not really doing much in Iraq, but I know a lot of guys that spent time out, operating in Iraq and then went to Afghanistan. Most of them, their assessment is there are more IEDs in Afghanistan, but they're lower quality. They're not as big. Iraq has fewer IEDs, but you're seeing more military-grade weapons, actual ordnance and stuff like that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, from what I've seen and the reports that I've heard, I never went to Afghanistan, but everything from the reports I saw from Afghanistan is a lot more of homemade explosives.
Yeah, the HME, yeah.
Versus Iraq, because of all the Iraqi army, depots and the caches and everything else, that suddenly started falling into the hands of the insurgents. So they had more access to that and using military munitions over having to make their own explosives. So I think that could be a contributing factor. I would say the vast majority of the stuff that I saw was munitions. I didn't really see or hear too much about HME for while I was there. I know things definitely got more. All around things got more sophisticated as the years went by. But even my last tour, when I was with the Recon on the Mew, it was still mostly military munitions that were, somehow concealed, and then they got really smart with their initiating systems.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like you said, Afghanistan was definitely the HME, the homemade explosives, and because of that, the quality of the explosive would vary wild. Like a 20-pound IED on one hand could just do a low order det, or maybe not even go off, just catch on fire, something like that. Or on the other hand, it could almost, flip over a smaller vehicle because it just depends on the manufacturer. And it's such a crazy, I don't know, it's a crazy concept. And it's kind of like what you were talking about with the initiating systems. What I saw in Afghanistan was a whole combination of stuff, and it was a lot of it did start out pretty basic and everything, and then it seems like, as the insurgency goes on or as the war goes on, and they continue to get funding from other nations, we continue to get funding to counter, their things. Everything just gets worse and worse like that. So yeah, really shitty time. So how often? When you were there for that second deployment, was that most of your guys' engagement with the enemy was IEDs, or were you having a lot of small arms attacks and
no, it was still primarily small arms engagements, RPGs. There was an issue of them, now that we had also started establishing this concept of the forward operating bases. Mm-hmm. So those are fixed targets, and they started building these things out, not really considering indirect fires. So the insurgents were able to use a lot of features as aiming stakes and start, sending mortars and rockets out of homemade launchers at friendly positions. So that was a big concern when we got there. It was actually way more of a concern than the IEDs. So as State Platoon, we were like immediately tasked with every night, at least two of the teams, if not all the teams, would get put out in spots around the FOB to patrol and look for the points of origin or POO sites for these rockets and mortars. So we would get the grids from previously detected sites, and we would patrol that area to see if they were going to come back. And it was pretty open terrain, so we had really good line of sight. The downside was we had like no night vision. Going into the invasion, everyone had night vision, even though it was mostly PVS 7 Bravos. NCOs and above had PVS 14s. But so, back when the 1-5 went to Iraq, instead of going to Okinawa on the 31st MEU, so 2-4 was left on the 31st MEU. They were out there for like 14, 15 months, something crazy. So they brought them back in, it was like August or September of 2004. And so San Mateo, where 5th Marines is home, is normally the 3 battalions, so 1st, 2nd, and 3rd battalions, and then also 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, all in San Mateo. And San Mateo was not designed to house the entirety of the regiment all at once. Like the barracks, the armory equipment. So like we were sharing M40 A1 sniper rifles with 2-4's State Platoon. We had to like deconflict with chutes because there wasn't enough to go around. So that's why, like I mentioned the other one, they sent us to Okinawa, even though they're like, yeah, you're not going 31st MEU, you're going to go to Iraq. They still sent us to Okinawa, and we got all of our gear in Okinawa. But what they had wasn't great. And they prioritized the night vision, which I understand, to the line company guys. So all the 0311s and the 31s, they like front loaded them all the, like not as much night vision and optics as they could. And so when it came turn for the State Platoon, we had a bunch of long guns. So we had 8 M40 A1s, and then the M40 A3 had just been fielded. So we got 8 of those, and we had 2 Sassers, but we had like no night optics.
Do you want to explain to people that may not know what an M40 is?
Yes, the M40 is the designation for the Marine Corps sniper rifle, and then the A1 or A3 is just different versions of it. So the A1 was essentially a Remington 700. The A3 had a different fiberglass stock that was a little bit heavier. It absorbed the recoil a little bit better. And they've gone on, so we're on M40 A6 now, as the weapons kind of morphed and changed over the years. So the M40 is the Marine Corps Scout Sniper Rifle weapon system. And then we had the M82 A1, the Barrett 50 cal, or Sasser, for Special Application Scope Rifle. Fortunately, our team was one of the 2 teams with a Sasser. That proved to be huge going into Fallujah on that deployment.
Really? Okay. Yeah, I was wondering. I always wonder how practical that actually is. Like I think people like to use it obviously because it's cool. It's like the 50 cal sniper rifle, but like the practicality of it, is it actually that much better than having an M40 A whatever version you're on at the time?
So I mean,
situation dictates, obviously.
Yeah, and I mean, practical as far as like moving it, no. Like moving around with that thing, it's heavy, it's long, it's awkward. So moving around with it was pain.
It's a solid 30 pounds, isn't it?
Yeah, about that. Yeah. And then once you're in position though, that's like, it's good and it's bad. Loud as hell. None of us have really learned our lesson about hearing protection from the invasion. So no one's really rolling around with hearing protection. And we were like shoving, brass casings or like cigarette filters in our ears to try and act as hearing protection. Because that Sasser, not only is it loud because it's a 50 caliber rifle, but the muzzle brake is designed to shoot the overpressure backwards towards the shooter and spotter. And that's meant to help kind of counter the felt recoil from the round going off. And so that's just more noise and energy that just gets projected at you, especially if you're the spotter and not the shooter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's an interesting beast to wield. Definitely something that if I had been thinking back then, I would have made sure I had lots of ear pro, which is a lesson I took away from that deployment, and always have spare ear pro. And I've become a real proponent for over-the-ear muffs with the electronic through.
Yeah.
That's pretty key.
That's starting to become kind of a standard thing now, right, in the Marine Corps? I mean, before it was only very few people you'd see running around with like a Peltor or something like that. Aren't they starting to issue that out to some like even regular units or regular dudes?
It's getting more widespread. I know there was a like a trial battalion on each coast that they gave like high cut helmets and one of the series of the Peltor Comtac headsets for radios. I think they gave them some other stuff just to see, what would it be helpful or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that's one of the goals is to move into like the high cut helmets and the over the ear hearing protection headsets. I don't know exactly what the fielding plan looks like for all that stuff. I don't even know if they figured it out yet, but you see that stuff from time to time on social media from the USMC gear page, the SysCom.
Yeah, Marcorps SysCom.
Yeah, Marcorps SysCom and the infantry equipment people.
I was talking about the Comtac. I think it was Comtac 3 is what I was using on the last episode with the Marsoc JTAC, Tony Musselman. And there's all kinds of headsets out there, and I've used a few different ones. But that Peltor Comtac 3 was like the shit. That was it for me. That was like, I don't know why, but it just it never failed on me. I had the connector where I could run two radios. So I had a radio in my left ear, radio in my right ear. And everybody else would go and people would buy their own. You'd see guys go out and spend like $1,500 for some crazy ass headset and then watch them like fiddle with it and it's all messing up and stuff. But that Comtac 3 always worked for me. I think they started putting those out when they had the ITV, the internally transportable vehicle, and the expeditionary fire support system, the 120 millimeter mortar. When that got fielded, fun fact, a lot of people don't realize that 120 millimeter mortar, the crack of that firing is actually louder than the 777. And that was something they realized at the beginning. When I was on the test team, we would shoot that mortar, and if you didn't have the windows down or something like that, we were cracking windshields all the time, our own windshields, but from the concussion from shooting that mortar. And I think that is what caused them to start pushing hearing protection to all the Arty guys that were working on that, and then it just kind of slowly, as part of the hearing conservation program, seems to be trickling down, which is great. What's your take? Now, this is an issue that I always, wearing a headset is great, and you hear a lot of stuff, and it cuts out a lot of bullshit too, because it'll have that, so you don't have some dude shooting right next to you. It's not making you go deaf. Another system where your situational awareness is a little different than reality is they have these electronic like up guns, where you can run the 50 cal from inside the vehicle. It's on the electronic turret. What is your take on one? It obviously ups your protection and stuff like that. What is your take on though, like being inside of a vehicle and not being able to hear the rounds from where they're coming from, or using a headset, not being able to discern exactly where that noise is coming from? Do you see that to be an issue at all?
No, I mean, I haven't been trained on any of those systems, so I don't know a whole lot about them. But from what I do know, just, kind of getting shot at is like if they start hitting the vehicle, that's one way. And I do know that there are systems out there that through the acoustics can tell you the direction that fire is coming from.
Yeah.
I know my first question when I saw one, I was like, well, what happens if the gun malfunctions? Like, what if there's, a stuck casing or something like that? Is there a system to fix it? Or is that gun down hard? Or, can you get out and fix it? But they've gotten pretty sophisticated through our building, Expeditionary Operations Training Group out here on the East Coast. There's some contractors that come in and they run classes on it. They usually just hook it up to a quad con, big shipping container, and they teach large groups of people on it. So I think that's kind of the way for. I think the JLTVs, the new joint light tactical vehicle that's replacing the Humvee, I think they're all meant to have like the automated turrets and not the man turrets.
Really? That's pretty wild that they're going. See,
I think so.
I always thought that was kind of weird because it's like, you know, being in the turret and actually like looking around and hearing and smelling and seeing, you know, like those are that's a lot of input that you're receiving and can help you decide what the hell's going on. And I wonder how much of that's lost inside the vehicle. And I guess the whole point was like, you know, even with over the ear headsets, you can sometimes lose the direction of where you're hearing something from because it's all electronic and coming through, you know, the headset. But anyways, yeah, it's good stuff, man. It's I mean, hearing conservation is crazy important. Especially you guys are shooting a Sasser. You're not hiding with that thing. You know, you're not in a hide somewhere and people don't know where you're at. I think when that boom goes off, everybody automatically knows where that location is. I'm sure it creates quite the noise and visual signature from shooting up dirt and stuff like that. Did you guys find that to be an issue at all? Like trying to be in a solid hide with that gun?
Yes and no. So that's definitely a major concern with any of the rifles. If you're going to be setting up low to the ground, things you can do to mitigate it. So like when I got to the platoon, we did our first Sasser shoot and we carried out all these water jugs. So the in between like certain courses of fire was just dumping water on the ground in front of the gun. So it wouldn't kick up as much dust, because it would all be wet. I mean, we weren't going to do that in hide sites. That was kind of a range thing.
Yeah, rangism.
So, you know, when it came to setting up in buildings, the idea was to, you know, be backed off away from the windows, which is a normal TTP anyways. And then even the Iraqis figured out, which was kind of frustrating. But you back away from the window, shoot from depth, and that will help mitigate a lot of that visual signature that any gun will create, but especially the Sasser.
Yeah, that thing's a beast, man. It's how many rounds out of that can you shoot out of that before it starts to become uncomfortable to shoot?
So the recoil is actually not that bad. I would think it's not even as much as like a 12 gauge shotgun.
Oh wow, really?
Just because the way that it's designed, you know, the way the muzzle brake helps redirect some of that overpressure coming out of the muzzle, and the barrel itself is meant to kind of reciprocate as it fires. It has a buffer spring similar to like an AR style weapon. So it's mitigated pretty well.
That's awesome.
So it's really not like uncomfortable. After like a long range day, you definitely kind of feel it in your shoulders. Like if you did like a, you know, out in the trap range or skeet range all day long, you kind of feel it in your shoulder a bit. But it's not terrible. It's really just the acoustics that will get to you.
Yeah, that's what I figured, that overpressure. So which of the sniper systems did you guys utilize more while you were on that second deployment? The Sasser or like the M40?
For our team, it was the Sasser.
Okay. Can you talk about any of the engagements you went through?
So, yeah, I mean, we did our initial patrols, and, you know, it was frustrating. We didn't have a lot of guidance and real direction of what to do. And then the Blackwater contractor incident happened on that bridge.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, we're going in. Like, they want to buy that ticket, we're going to give them the ride. So we're going into Fallujah, and we get assigned to Alpha Company. My team, Seminole Charlie, gets attached to Alpha Company, and we drive in. No one gave us any direction other than we're attached to Alpha Company. But that was it. Not like what platoon, what our job is, no commander's intent. So we rolled to a staging area the night before. And then, you know, early morning hours before sunrise, we actually rolled into the city proper. All the trucks park, and everyone's dismounting, and we're trying to like look like, hey, where are we going? What are we doing? We're calling out to like, you know, platoon sergeant, squad leaders, and nobody gives us anything. So we're like, okay, I guess we'll just wait here at the trucks. And so we're just hanging out, keeping our eyes open, holding localized security, and then someone starts hollering, where's the snipers, where's the snipers, where's the snipers? And we hop up and we're looking like, hey, we're over here, and this dude comes running up. He's like, hey, we need snipers right now. We're like, oh shit. So right now means right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we just hop out of the Humvee with the gear that we have on us. I grabbed, I didn't even grab my day bag because I had the M249, the light machine gun. So I just had my body armor, my vest with all my ammo, helmet, and my machine gun. One of the guys grabbed his 3-day bag that had a little bit of supplies in it, and we just start hauling ass, running after, I'm pretty sure the dude was like a private first class, to figure out like what's going on. Like there's something is wrong, and they need reinforcements of some kind that we can provide. And it just turned out that that platoon was told that we would be attached to them, but no one told us that we would be attached to them. So that's all it was. The platoon commander just didn't have accountability of us and was wondering if they were. That's all it was. But unfortunately, at this point, we're now like 500-600 meters separated from our truck, and they're trying to push forward. So we're like, okay, well, let's just move with them. And then at our earliest time, we need to get back to the truck because we have like no radios. We have our little handheld ICOM radios that we all used to use back then.
Yeah.
That's it. We didn't have our 119, didn't have our 150. We didn't have the Sasser. Like we had very little on us. And we're following this platoon. We get in place, one position, and hanging out. Still not a lot of direction. And then all of a sudden, the company just ups and moves. After like maybe a day, they just up and move. And I look over at the guy. I'm like, hey, I'm pretty sure they just fucking left us. Like we're on a rooftop by ourselves now. And we were actually at that point, we were down to 2. So it was myself and my team leader. My ATL and the other guy had been split to another rooftop. They were able to go back and they went back and got another bolt gun, another M40, and they grabbed another day bag. So they had a day bag with some water and chow and a long gun. We had a day bag with some water and chow and a long gun. And we just had our little handheld radios to try and talk to people. Now the company's picked up and moved, and no one's talking to us over the radio. No one's telling us what's going on. So I was like, hey, we know where they're at. Like, we just need to break down and move to them. So both of us communicated, and we broke down our positions, and we moved to them. And once again, we start moving through the city with this same platoon from the night prior. And as we get moving, they're like, hey, we need to get back to the truck because we need more than what we have on us. Like, we don't have all of our sustainment. We need to get more of our stuff. So they let a couple of our guys go back. The same 2 that broke off from myself and the team leader went back and they grabbed the Sasser. But now that they have the Sasser and it's assembled and the assistant team leader is carrying it, so he's got an M16 with a 203 grenade launcher underslung in one hand, and he's got the Sasser over his shoulder in the other hand. And we just start patrolling through the city in a movement to contact, trying to link up with the rest of the company. And then we start getting shot at, which, okay, we get shot at. That's what happens. And most of us are good. I've got a light machine gun, so I've got all the firepower I need. But my ATL is trying to like chicken wing with the stock under his shoulder in one hand and run with the Sasser. So he's got like no effective fires whatsoever. He's basically just trying to run from cover to cover, not really able to contribute. And when we finally got to a spot where we linked up, somebody identified on a rooftop. It was pretty far off. Initially, there was like, hey, way over there, there's a bunch of guys on the rooftop. And within the rules of engagement, if we're in a firefight, if there are people observing us from rooftops and balconies with binoculars or phones or radios or flying kites, because they were using kites as aiming stakes for mortars and rockets and signaling, we were allowed to engage them. So they could bring, they're like, holy shit, that's not just a ways over there. That's like 1,800 meters away. Like, oh, get the Sasser up. Like, that's the only thing we've got that's going to range that.
Get the Sasser. What's the max effective range on that? Or where's your
really
sweet spot for engagements?
Not quite that far.
Yeah.
We had trained to shoot at vehicle-sized targets at like 2,000. I think the furthest anyone managed to get was like 2,200 yards on a vehicle on one of the ranges on Camp Pendleton. I don't remember what it was supposed to be. It was influenced by the fact that back then we still had the fixed 10-power uneural scopes on those things. So it was fire and adjust to try and get out. So I was spotting, the other guy was on the gun, and I was actually trying to hold the spotting scope with my fingertips and keep my thumbs in my ears to mitigate all the sound coming out of the gun and all the dust and everything getting kicked back in my face. So I just stopped spotting after a few rounds because he was actually able to kind of see the impacts. So we're using a round called a Rothfuss round. So it has a small explosion to it. So he was able to pick that up. And he walked the rounds on and got a few of them. So a couple guys down at like 1,800 yards with the Sasser. So we were pretty sold on it at that point.
He got a few of them with the single shot, like once he got on target?
Yeah, once he got on target. It took a few rounds to adjust, but then he was on target.
It was like a small grenade just, landed amongst the dudes, basically?
I mean, he got direct hits.
There you go.
That's once crazy. He walked it on. So we used it. From that point, we're like, okay, well, this thing's going to be pretty effective for us. So we kept setting it up, every position. I mean, it was one of the three long guns that we had. We had 2 bolt guns, 2 M40s, and then the Sasser. So everywhere we went, we made sure that the Sasser was one of the primary guns that we put up. And we did have to deal with a lot of far targets throughout our time in Fallujah. We did some near targets, but a lot of far targets too.
Okay. Now, for those that may not know, the whole thing with Fallujah was after the Blackwater incident, after these contractors were killed, drugged through the streets, and then set on fire, and then hung from the bridge that goes over the Euphrates. That's when there was a scramble to do something about Fallujah, because it was already known to be a pretty crappy spot to be in already. But it was one of those we were trying to allow diplomacy to work. Like, hey, Iraqis, are you going to take care of your city? And the Iraqis were like, yeah, we got it. We're going to take care of it. And then that whole incident occurred. And then, like you said, they were like, screw this. We're done with it. We're going to go into the city now. And that's probably why there was a lot of confusion too. Cause that was within a day or two, right? They started moving guys into the city. So it's all the operational planning that had already taken place or was in the process was halted to turn and, start a direct assault into the city. The difference between Fallujah 1 and Fallujah 2 is Fallujah 2, the second time they went in, the main assault through the city, that was a very deliberate process. Again, they tried to let diplomacy work. They made you guys pull back, and they tried to let diplomacy work and let the Iraqis take care of the city. It did not occur. So they surrounded the city and blocked anybody from being able to leave. And it was like, hey, if you're an insurgent, or if you're not an insurgent, you need to leave the city. And they gave them warnings like, hey, here's how it's going to happen. We're going to come into the city at some point, but from now until then, you can leave if you want. If you don't, you're going to be considered hostile. Now, in your situation, Fallujah 1, that wasn't the case. You guys didn't have time to cordon off the city and allow people to leave and stuff. So as you're moving into Fallujah, how many local civilians and stuff are you seeing, or are they already trying to get out of the city? Do they know what's happening?
So it was pretty quick. They did issue a similar edict, like, hey, you want to leave the city. If you're not a fighter, leave the city. And if you want to fight, go ahead and stick around. But it was a very quick turnaround. So we were in there pretty fast. We got word, they told us that a lot of people had left the city, but the entire time we saw just everyday civilians, which isn't too surprising. Like, you tell someone, hey, you got to leave your home. It's like, well, well, I have nowhere else to go.
Yeah, where am I going to go?
Right. So, and I don't think there had been any major fighting in that city yet. So for most of them, it's like, well, I'm sure I'll be fine. They're not after me. They're after, these other people, so whatever. So there were still a lot of civilians, and there were some control points set up around the city, which later on we got assigned to one of them to the south with a different company, and a lot of people were trying to get back into the city.
Mm-hmm.
Like, despite all the fighting, every day there would be lines of cars of people trying to get back into the city. It's like, you don't want to do that. Like, there's still fighting going on. There's still bombs being dropped. There's still all this, like, you just need to stay out, And plus, we didn't want to let people back in, not only because we want to minimize the collateral damage, but it's really easy for somebody to say, like, oh, I just want to go back to my home. Yeah. And then they're just, another person's going to pick up a rifle and try to fight us. So.
Yeah, it's a crazy, a crazy situation to be in. Like, I don't know. You guys were fighting for a little bit before they called it off, and they tried to go back to a diplomatic effort there. Do you remember when they were like, "Hey, we're pulling out of the city," and like, what was kind of the feeling amongst everybody there?
So that was before that even happened, we hit this political ceasefire. How it was described to us was political ceasefire, and that happened like a weekend, if that. And so that was when we got moved down to that control point, and we were doing counter sniper down there and trying to help them control people, trying to sneak in around the control point. Mm-hmm. We got moved to one other spot in the city, and then they're like, "Yeah, we're just gonna pull back," and we're like, "Just like that? Like, do we achieve the objective? Because it doesn't seem like we achieved our objective." Mm-hmm. There's still a lot of fighting going on, and a lot of us had been there for the push into Baghdad, so we knew what it looked like in our minds to take a city, because we moved into Baghdad, we took the palace, and we held the palace, and we went out and we patrolled, and we controlled that territory. Like, there was no fighting anymore on our side, minus like maybe a pot shot here or there, but within a couple of days, we pretty much crushed their will to fight. Like, we haven't done that here, so what was the objective we achieved? And they're like, we just got to pull back. And they were like, oh, Mattis is, he's going to try to prove it by driving a convoy through. And he said that if he gets shot at, that he's going to bring the Marines back in. We're like, oh, okay, cool. Well, he's definitely going to get shot at, so I guess we'll be back soon. Yeah. But we didn't go back. We continued operations elsewhere. There's a city, Garma, a little bit to the northeast of Fallujah. That's where my team then spent a lot of time working, attached to some of the other companies. And our teams, we got farmed out to all the different companies, and we're just kind of working all over the place. So my team permanently worked out of that area and around Garma. And that's how we spent the last of the few months of the deployment, was up there. Operation Vigilant Resolve, or the first Battle of Fallujah, however you want to look at it. I think ultimately it was 3 weeks out of my life, if that. Kind of just a small portion of that deployment.
Yeah. At the time, did it seem significant? Did it feel like it was like this? This city, this whole thing is like because it is now. Like, when we look back on it now, that was the first steps into the main assault into Fallujah, which was obviously one of the most most famous battles, or infamous battles, however you want to put it, of the entire war.
Yeah. We didn't really look at it that way, because, again, a lot of us had been in Baghdad, and conveniently enough, this was April again. So we're like, oh, cool. Spring break, laying siege to another Iraqi city. Like, this is just what we do now. Like, every spring break, we're going to, what are the other cities in Iraq? What's the next spring break location for next year?
Who's giving us trouble?
That was how we looked at it. That's just how we looked at it. And we didn't really think about how significant it would be in historical context, because it's just a thing we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Looking back at it.
Go ahead.
No, I was thinking, like now looking back at it, I can see the significance, and it's frustrating sometimes, especially like later on in the year, back stateside, and I remember walking to Chow Hall Mateo, and there's news on the screen, and it's the ticker says Marines in Fallujah, and I'm like, they're putting news about us up now? Like that was months ago. And then I saw this thing, Operation Phantom Fury. It's like, are you gonna be kidding me? Like now they're finally gonna take care of this problem. Like we were there, we had it under control, we could have handled the problem, but now a whole different group of Marines and soldiers and sailors are gonna go in there and have to redo all of the work that we had done. The enemy's probably more prepared, and they were.
They were, for sure.
And I think that was a tougher fight for those guys, because then everyone's like, okay, well, now we know how the Americans are going to come into the city. So they fortified the hell out of that place, and it was a much tougher fight for the guys of Phantom Fury than it was for us in Vigilant Resolve. And they could have just let us handle it.
Yeah.
So that is what has become really frustrating for a lot of us. The guys that I've talked to, when I do get to speak to guys, from 1-5, it's like you didn't let us finish.
Let us finish the job.
Yeah.
I can see both sides. I mean, I see where the diplomats are like, hey, man, we want the Iraqis to, like, kind of own this and kind of take control. And that was supposed to be the plan. Like, when you guys got pulled out, the Iraqi army and the Iraqi police were supposed to go in there and control, try to manage the city. But I think that proved to be unmanageable, and that city was also like a hotbed for the insurgency. A lot of insurgents came from that area, so it didn't. Like you said, when you guys pulled out, all that did was give them time to reinforce, and that's what they did. They turned these houses to bunkers machine gun bunkers on the inside. They built rat holes and stuff like that, so they can move from house to house without being detected and crazy stuff. It's hearing anyone talk about their experiences in Fallujah has been, it's humbling. It's like, dude, my Marine Corps experience is completely different than yours. Like, you're way more of a hardcore person that did that. Like, I talk about him all the time, but Hanthorn was on episode, I think 4 or 5. He's on one of my first episodes. And, this dude was a motor T operator, and he got attached to 3-1 as him and his other dudes that he was with to do casualty affairs, pull up, basically clean up dead insurgents, right, follow not the house that's being cleared, but they're in the house behind that one that they had just finished clearing, pulling the dead dudes out if there's any. And I'm like, dude, I can't even imagine, man. Like, that's an unimaginable for me kind of situation to have found yourself in the Marine Corps, and it's like, I don't know. But I think Fallujah's crazy, Fallujah is one of those significant things I think Marines should probably always talk about and remember, and what happened there and stuff like that. And I think we learned a lot of TTPs out of that too,
Yeah. I mean, for me, I was, again, I was the saw gunner for the team. I had the, M249 light machine gun. I was also the radio operator. So I had to carry the 119 Fox on my back. And after, the invasion, and we expended a lot of ammo in a lot of places in the invasion. So going into the second deployment, we're like, hey, you need to be heavy on ammo because firefights last a long time. Mm-hmm. We always need fire suppression to maneuver, and then you keep shooting, and you're not guaranteed resupply. So you need to have lots of ammo for like multiple fights over multiple days. Mm-hmm. So I rolled out, and I had like 1,500 rounds of 5.56 Link on me.
That's crazy.
Like, my vest was built out with almost 1,500 rounds plus 100 rounds in my saw. And on the ride up from Kuwait to Iraq, we were getting the Humvees ready. I had jumped in because I had a load-bearing vest, and back then we all had to have butt packs built up as shooting supports because the M40E1s didn't have bipods. So if you're going to shoot from the prone, you had to use your butt pack. And I was like, SOP, no way around it, had to do it. So that's what I had set up. But when I got in the Humvees, trying to sit in the bench with this big block on my lower back, like, it was really uncomfortable. So I looked at my team and was like, hey, I'm not going to wear that for the drive up. Like, I'm not going to use it. I've got this chest rig platform that I wore for the invasion. I'm going to put all my saw pouches on that, and I'll run. I think I only ran like 800 rounds for that, for the movement up. And on one of the stops, I remember I hopped out, and it's all this weight up front. I was like, oh, wow, like, that's kind of hard to stand around with all this weight on the front. So I'm definitely going to go back to the load-bearing vest so it's spread out around me. But what I should have done, once we knew we were going to the city, is I should have went back to that chest rig. I should have carried a little bit less ammo, just what I could carry on that chest rig, and maybe a little bit extra in my radio pack. Because try and move around with all that ammo, 4 quarts of water, the stupid butt pack support that I didn't need because I'm employing a machine gun. I'm not the guy primarily behind one of the A1s. And we didn't even bring an A1. We brought our A3s with bipods, and the SSGT had bipods. So there was really no need for it. And it was just made it really, really hard to maneuver through a lot of different spaces in the city, because one, things get really tight, so it gets hard to maneuver through tight spaces when you're like a Michelin man of munitions. And then it's also incredibly heavy, so like trying to scale over walls to sneak into compounds of the buildings to set up, I would have to, put my machine gun down, take my vest off, throw it over the wall to somebody that had already scaled it, pass my machine gun over, and then climb over the wall and then put all my stuff back on. Whereas if I'd been equipped a little bit better, be able to maneuver better and not have to go through all these processes to do that. So I learned a lot. And it's a lot of stuff I've tried to relay onto all the Marines that I've led and taught since.
That's exactly what we were talking about prior to, starting the podcast. So for, you and I were discussing, that experience of being able to relay like some of your experience to these junior guys, and hopefully they pick up some of it so they don't have to relearn some of these lessons. It's invaluable, like having that deployment experience. And it's not necessarily saying that whatever you did was the absolute correct way and that's what everyone should do, but it's another tool in the toolbox and something to consider, if for someone that may have never even been in that situation before.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to talk about from your second deployment? Are there any other key events that you'd like to go over before we move on?
Not really. I mean, there's, there's thousands of little stories, but not too many major events. It was just kind of a good primer for me. We did a lot of stuff as 4-man teams and 2-man teams. So that was good for me. Because I gained a lot more confidence, but it was also bad because I got a little overconfident. Kind of went the opposite way of being complacent, or maybe it could be considered complacency. Like, I figured, there's nothing I can't tackle. So that led to me taking some pretty bold steps. So like one of our methods when we were supporting the one company south of the city in their counter sniper mission was the guy would only fire 3 times when he would move. And he had different locations. And so as soon as he would shoot, he would normally only shoot like once or maybe twice. So I started standing up on the rooftop and flicking the bird to get him to shoot again. And it was somewhat effective. And so he would always fire 3 rounds. And on that 3rd round, it'd be like, okay, I know where he's at. It was trying to jump behind the gun and spot him before he moved through the scope. And we were able to narrow down locations. I'd be like, I know where he's at. And it got to the point where after 1 round, I would know exactly where he's at. We had them, those spots registered as TRPs with the 81 millimeter mortars that were with us.
Yeah.
And so I'd grab the radio, fire mission TRP-1, jump behind the Sasser because all these targets were 12 to 1,400 yards away. Jump on the Sasser, get on the gun, get on scope so I can at least spot the rounds. And if I can see this shooter himself, I can try and take a shot. And just in general, I pulled in a lot of mortars. I put 1.5 Winchester on 81 millimeter HE inside of a week.
Oh wow.
Um,
That's good. I mean, using mortars is the easiest thing to use. You know, you don't have to worry about all the crazy clearances for heavier weapons.
Yeah, it was great, and so I learned a lot with that, and did hopefully a good amount of damage. I mean, we never got close enough to actually go see, but funny enough, the lieutenant in charge of that mortar section got a NAM or a Bronze Star with a V for the actions of that mortar section. But our team did get honorable mention as the observers inside his citation, so I take that as a win.
Well, there you go, man. You got mentioned in the officer citation, so can't beat that, right?
Yeah,
that's pretty standard.
And to his credit, after the back in the rear, he got his award. He came over and he thanked us and shook our hands. He's like, "Hey, you guys made this possible." We're like, "Okay."
Yeah. He's not the one to write up the award. The award system in the Marine Corps is so fucked. There was a kid. There's a kid like 2 weeks ago who saved 2 people. I think it was in Okinawa or somewhere. It might have been here in Camp Lejeune. I don't know. But he saved 2 people that were like drowning or something off the coast of, while he was just at the beach or whatever. And they gave him a NAM. I'm like, what? Like, how did he not? They said he swam like 150 yards out and saved 2 people. I'm like, how did he not get a Navy and Marine Corps medal? You know what I'm saying? Like, if that had been, it was a Lance Corporal. I was like, if that had been a captain that swam out and saved 2 people on his own time, 100% would have gotten a Navy and Marine Corps medal. Lance Corporal Schmuckatelli gets a fucking NAM. You know what I'm saying? Which I've seen guys get for keeping generators filled with gas during a field exercise. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
That's why a lot of people are butthurt about the Marine Corps awards process, stuff like that. You see that kind of stuff, and you're like, this is garbage. But yeah, well, guys that are doing this shit are doing it for the awards anyway. So
yeah, in dive school, we had a formation before one of the events, and all these sailors are getting NAMs for literally like tightening bolts on dive helmets and stuff like that, and just like maintaining good records and maintenance. And they go through all these sailors, and they're getting their NAMs for basically just performing their duties. And then it gets to 2 of the Marine Combat Dive instructors, 2 reconnaissance Marines, and they start reading their NAM with V citations. And both of them were basically a unit was under fire from a mortar team. These guys maneuvered to a position, eliminated the mortar team and the mortar, which saved, countless lives. So they're getting a NAM with V for, schwacking enemy mortar teams. Mm-hmm. And as they're reading these NAMs, I just see all the heads in the rest of the formation that got NAMs for, tightening bolts just kind of dip down a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, these guys earned these fucking awards.
The Navy gives out more NAMs than anybody I've ever seen. They give out more NAMs like that than anybody. And I know exactly what you're talking about. I received a NAM with a V for, shit we didn't sing in. And I got it. I got back to Camp Lejeune. I was at 10th Marines. I was with the headquarters regiment because I was one of the JTACs. So it was me and whoever else is in regimental headquarters, right? And they're like, "Hey, you're getting this award on this date, so come on out, whatever." So we have the formation, and same deal. There was 3 of us, and they read off the first 2 kids, or I can't remember if they read theirs first or mine first. I don't remember. But either way, it was the same thing where they had both just gotten back from Bridgeport, and they had like set up comm or something like that, and they got a NAM for it. And then they read my citation off. And I said something to one of the staff NCOs afterwards. I was a staff sergeant at the time. I was like, dude, that was fucked up. I was like, I remember getting my first NAM as a Lance Corporal, as a mechanic, and I was super pumped about it. And had I received that next to someone that was getting a combat award, it would have just made me feel bad about getting that award, and it wouldn't have meant as much. I was like, they shouldn't have done that. And that wasn't me like saying that those kids shouldn't have got the NAM, whatever. They shouldn't have got it in the same formation, because that just kind of, it watered down. To me, it seemed like it watered down their award, and I really felt bad for that. But
Yeah.
it's crazy though. The award system's so messed up. Anyways, so you get back from your second deployment to Iraq. Are you still on your first enlistment at this time? You got to be at the end if you are.
Yeah, I was pretty close to the end of my enlistment. I was reaching my 3-year mark, and I joined the Marine Corps for two things. One was to be a Marine Corps Scout Sniper, which I never went to school, still haven't. So being in state platoon and doing work in Fallujah, I consider it as like I achieved half of that goal.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was I wanted to be Force Recon. And I'd always asked. I had volunteered in SOI, and like they picked the dudes around me, and I kept trying to volunteer when I was in the fleet, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're a boot, you're not going to go, or you're not going to pass, so why bother going?" And just getting shot down, and no one would tell us who screeners were, and I was just getting frustrated. I'm like, I really want this, but ultimately what I want is to work in a world of guys who are disciplined, who want to be there, who are motivated, passionate about the job. I'm like, so if there's a different route, then I'm going to do that. And one of my friends told me about the 18 X-ray program that the Army had started back up. I guess they'd done it one time before. And I was like, well, if I can just go to an Army recruiter office and be like, hey, sign me up for 18 X-ray, and go. I mean, I knew I still would still have to like make it all the way through, but I couldn't even get to the point of being tested for recon. So I was like, I'm just going to do that. I was like, I'm going to finish out my last year. Maybe we'll deploy for a third time, and I'm just going to get out of the Marine Corps, and I'm going to go to the Army and do this 18 X-ray thing. And I was like, it was kind of depressing and kind of defeated. Well, two of our company commanders in the battalion had come over from First Force to get their command time, because this 0321s or 0307s, recon officers, they had to get command time in the infantry in order to be able to make major and continue their careers.
Yeah.
And I wasn't the only one. There were a lot of guys that wanted to go over to recon, and word started getting around, and these two captains found out. So they called back to the company, and Force Company was like, yeah, like we're hurting for people. And you've got a bunch of guys with like 2 combat deployments under their belt now, and you guys have done a lot of work. And you know what? Like, fuck it, anybody. Normally it was like you had to be a sergeant and have so many deployments, but they were like, anybody. We'll take Lance Corporal through First Lieutenant. Like, anybody that you want to send that wants to give it a shot, like, send them.
What year was this again?
2004.
Okay. Do you find that to be a common issue? Is that the infantry battalions don't really facilitate the guys that want to move into like the reconnaissance role?
Yeah, my experience it was, and from some of the things I've heard with talking to the infantry guys that I still train off and on, that's still kind of a thing. Part of it is you have the guys that are too scared to try themselves. So, they want to tell you that you're not going to make it, so they don't have to feel bad about themselves, about them not having the courage. And then you also run into, like, people just don't know enough. With recon, we've historically done a really shitty job at recruiting. We've gotten better with it, probably the last 10 years or so. Especially now with social media, there's Instagram accounts, and they announce it when there's going to be screeners and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And for a long time, we didn't have the recon contract either. So, guys couldn't come off the street and say, I want to go recon. If you, like I did that, and they were like, cool story. Here's an infantry contract, and you can volunteer for it once you're in SOI. So it made it difficult for guys to get over and just get to the screener. And then, like, once you found out when a screener was, you had to get permission from your command to even go. And if your company was going to the field at that time, like, forget about it.
Yeah.
They're not going to let you go. Right? So that's always been difficult.
Yeah, that's definitely not their priority. And I'm sure it's not their, guys that they would prefer to get rid of that are trying to go over to recon. It's probably your higher caliber dudes. Anytime you're asking to get put through the ringer, it takes a different kind of mindset, and that's probably the mindset that they want to retain. Do you think that someone that goes that's like at a line or at a Victor unit and they decide to go to recon, but they don't make it and they come back to their unit, you think that's pretty tough on them?
I would imagine.
I think the command is probably like, oh, now you're good enough to stay here. Like one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, that would be tough. That was one of the things I kept thinking about when I was going through Recon Indoc, because there were definitely moments where, like, I sucked in the water. I was terrible, and my cadre knew that. So they would always, do things to put a lot of pressure. And I'd look at the side of the pool and be like, I could grab that wall and just take like a 5-second breather and then get back at this. But as soon as I touch that wall, that's a drop.
Oh, really?
Like, that's, yeah. If I grab that wall, I am saying that I'm done and I'm quitting. And how am I going to go back to 1-5, especially after all the talk? That's all I ever talked about. I was like, I'm going to go to recon. I'm going to go recon. I'm going to go recon. I'm going to go recon. And then I made a big deal about preparing for the screener and for all this. And
now you're putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, I'm like, I can't do it. I was like, how will I progress in life? And these are all like floating through my head as I'm like struggling to stay on the surface of the water and gasp for air. I was like, I mean, I don't know how I would do it.
Isn't it crazy how the feeling that you're kind of shaming yourself, like, is that motivation that kept you going? Like, it's not really like, oh man, I'll feel better. Like, oh, I could get a rest and I'll be done. It was more like, how am I going to live with myself? If after all the shit I talked, I guess, hey, whatever you got to use to motivate you to get you through something like that, So let's talk about, if you want, well, I'd like you to break down your BRC experience, kind of tell us the different sections that you went through, because there's different phases. That way anyone that's watching or listening can kind of get an idea if that's something that they're interested in. And then if you want, as you're talking about your experience, I know it's changed probably since you went to BRC. If you want to kind of compare and contrast like what it used to be like to what it's like now, and maybe give some advice to people that are looking to go through that hell.
Yeah. So it's definitely different now than what it used to be. So what it used to be is Recon Battalion or the Force Company, because they used to be separate units, would in one way, shape, or form advertise that they were going to hold a screener. And the screeners were different for the two. The Force Indoc, as it was known, was pretty much an all-day event, whereas the Recon screener was a PFT and a modified, like the old CWS-Q swim call.
Yeah.
Or I think it was the old CWS-Q swim call or CWS-1. So you like basically run through a couple of swim calls and a standard Marine Corps PFT, and that was it. Like, you got screened, because then they would screen you, and then the Recon battalions would have you TAD to them or PCA to them, and you would be put in Recon Indoc platoon or RIP.
Okay, so you're getting actual orders to go over there, temporary orders to go over there to see if you can make it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes temporary, sometimes permanent. I think that kind of just depended on what the unit wanted to do. But you'd be in RIP, and you could be in RIP for 3, 6, maybe even 9 months. Just really depended on the output that you gave it, when BRC or ARS classes, because we have BRC on the West Coast and we used to have ARS on the East Coast. So it's like when the classes were starting, how many seats were available.
What does ARS stand for again? I've heard that before, but I forget.
Amphib Recon School.
Okay.
So there were a lot of different factors, and then it wasn't like an official program. It was just some people that were available. So you might start RIP, and the Recon Marines that are running it, maybe they've got a decent program. You're going to get thrashed and all that, but like they have a plan to put you into BRC, or you might get some guys who just want to thrash the piss out of you, and all they're getting out. So that's their focus, is like, I'm getting out, I'm EASing, I've got, taps and tamps, so we used to call it before it was TRS.
Yeah.
And then I'm just going to get out, and I don't care about these guys because they're just ropers. So that's going to be somebody else's problem after I get out. So it could be anything. It was very unregimented. I can obviously really speak to like West Coast. First Recon did run a pre-BRC course. It was a 3-week course to go through like the knowledge that you would be expected to gain before BRC, which would make BRC easier. And typically with a force company, you would run the 1-day indoc, and that would finish with an interview with the company commander, who was the lieutenant colonel, and the company sergeant major. And they would talk to you, ask you questions, and try to get a feel for who you were. And based on your performance and then the interview, they'd be like, yes, we are going to accept you to the company and give you a seat to the basic recon course, or no, sorry, you're just not what we're looking for right now. And they send you back.
Would you lose a lot of people in that phase initially?
So typically it was pretty high attrition in that indoc. My story is kind of a combination of the two. So the problem that the force company been having, because so you do the indoc and be like, okay, cool, we want you. We're looking at this date for you to start BRC, and they would just send you back to your unit because you still belong to them. And they'd be like, hey, we're working out, and they would just let you know when to report to the basic recon course. So they would have guys show up to BRC, and maybe they've gotten out of shape, so maybe they didn't score high enough on the PFT in test or pass the swim screener in test. A lot of guys were having trouble on the open ocean swims with dive fins because they didn't know how to do it, and they're trying to learn on the fly, whereas all the guys from Recon Battalion who've been through RIP are kicking ass because that's all they did in RIP was swim and fin and hike and run. And the guys went back to the units thinking that they made it, and so they were having a high fail rate for guys that passed the force indoc. So like, we ran a modified version of the indoc, and they're like, look, you guys didn't perform amazingly, but this was also 2 weeks after returning from deployment. So they're like, you guys just came off deployment. We get it. It wasn't amazing, but no one was terrible. So we're going to take all of you guys. There were 12 of us on that. We're going to take all of you, and we're going to train you for a month, and then you're going to run the indoc. And if you don't pass the indoc at that time, then you're not going to get a seat to BRC, and we're probably going to send you back to 1-5. So we're like, okay. So we had to go back after that, get our permissive TAD, and pretty much check out a 1-5 and report into the force company. And so we started our RIP with the force company, which was not how it was normally done. So that was great for me because I suck in the water, and I definitely would not have had access to the water that I did as a roper if I was just hanging around 1-5 waiting for orders. And I would have been, getting tasked out every day to do stuff with the platoon instead of just focusing on getting trained up and ready to go to BRC.
Yeah. And that first phase of BRC is the pool phase, right? That's when you guys are, see where everybody stands in the water.
Yeah.
I had Cameron Langland come on way back, like probably episode 30 or something like that, and he was very adamant about, Recon Marines cannot be drowned. You guys have been through so much stuff that it's almost impossible to drown a Recon Marine. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that statement?
Up until pre-dive.
Yeah.
That's where you learn again that you can be drowned.
I've heard pre-dive is miserable.
Yeah, pre-dives can be very interesting depending on how they're run and who's doing it, similar to the old RIP.
Yeah.
But so I did September, October, November, December, 5 months in RIP. The force company sent us over to 1st Recon Battalion to do their pre-BRC course, which was cool because I got to meet guys that were RDO 321s at 1st Recon, and those are people that I've bumped into multiple times since in my career. And I got to meet more of like my peer group. So reporting in a BRC months later, I already knew a bunch of these guys, and it just made it easier to get through. I already have relationships developed rather than, you know, because not only was there a little bit of hate against guys from First Force, but we were also, on top of being all from First Force, because at that point, I should say, after 3 days of training, we started on a Wednesday, ended on a Friday. That Monday, before we got started, 7 dudes quit.
Really?
They came off the weekend. They walked in. They looked at me. They're like, "Hey, man, we're gonna quit." I'm like, "Why are you telling me? Like, I'm not even the senior guy here. Like, we got this sergeant over here." They're like, "Oh, we figured we'd tell an NCO." And I was like, "All right, well, I guess here in like 10 minutes when we meet the cadre, I'll let them know that all you guys want to quit." And so we went from 12 to 5 real quick.
Oh, you should get more one-on-one instruction, you know?
Yeah. So, you know, then we just became more of a clique.
Yeah.
And we're all from 1-5, and most of us came from the same company. So now we're in BRC, so we're a super tight-knit group, super cliquey. Like, one of the guys, he joined RIP a little bit after we did, but we were in the same infantry platoon in Alpha 1-5. And then, you know, he was still in Alpha when I was in Weapons and supporting him. And, like, now we're in BRC together. So, like, I was there the day that he reported into the fleet. And he was, like, my rifleman for, you know, all of, like, 3 days before he got moved to another fire team. So, like, we had a lot of history. And we were just this super tight little group. And I think if we had showed up to BRC without knowing any of the guys from 1st Recon Battalion, that definitely would have put us more at odds and made the experience more difficult. But because we'd already made friends with a lot of these guys in the pre-BRC course, you know, then it was just some being at odds with some of the instructors, which is kind of how that goes,
yeah.
You know?
Personalities.
Yeah. BRC was a little rough because I was still really bad in the water. I was getting better, but I wasn't the fish that, you know, my peers were yet. And I was really slow on fins. And I was really nervous about being able to pass the fins at BRC. And we got lucky that they had recently changed their policy to the only fin you needed to pass was one of the 2K open ocean swims. As long as you made one 2K swim under an hour, like, that was the minimum requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And like the very first 2K swim, you know, my partner and we would constantly come in like 10 seconds past drop dead time, 20 seconds past drop dead time. And the first 2K swim, we finished like 5 seconds past drop dead time. It was like, crap. I'm like, dude, this next one, like, we just got to fin our asses off. And so we passed 2 of the 3 or 4 2K fins ultimately. So we met more than the minimum standard, but I was like, that was something I was very nervous for. And so my experience was actually more amphib was my phase 1. And the phases have changed a lot over the years. So we did a lot of fins, we did pool days, but despite everything, our class was like really, really terrible in the pool. So we did 2 pool sessions, and the cadre's like, you know what? You guys are such a pain in the ass in the pool. They're like, we're not going to do any more pool sessions like that. I'm like, I don't really know if that's how that's supposed to work. Like,
yeah,
if we suck hard enough, you know, we don't have to do the shitty thing anymore. But I also wasn't going to argue with it.
Yeah, you're like, well, I really don't want to get back in the pool anyway.
So instead, we did a lot of what were supposed to be like pool thrash sessions. We did run, swim, run, swim, run, swim, run, swim, run, swim runs. It'd be like a 3-mile loop into a 250-meter swim to another 3-mile loop to 250-meter swim for 2 hours or whatever it was, just to wear us out that way instead.
That'll do it.
Yeah. And then we did land nav, which was super easy because, well, initially it was easy because we did it by San Mateo, which is still where one of the land nav courses is. And I was like, oh, I grew up here.
Yeah.
Like, I know this terrain, And then I started walking around and seeing the BRC land nav points. I'm like, oh, that's what these things are? Like, I've always wondered what these random poles are out here in the hills. I'm like, oh, I know what they're for. So that was really easy. And ultimately in BRC, come between the fact that I started in a boat company in the infantry, so I knew boats, I knew amphib operations. Then I went to a state platoon, so I knew small unit patrolling. I understood, how to set up observation posts and reporting and radios, and all the work that was done with us during RIP. I didn't actually learn anything at BRC. I was never really, other than the finning, I was never really challenged at BRC. That is definitely due to the credit of, getting my ass kicked in RIP. But again, it kind of led me to get a little complacent. Like, I thought I was going to learn all kinds of like amazing high speed stuff that I had never known before, because I didn't appreciate the basics.
Mm-hmm.
But then I didn't learn anything. So I was like, okay, I guess I kind of know everything. So I just have to get better at it. Like, I know everything. I just need to get better at it.
Yeah.
Okay. Which was completely wrong.
Yeah.
Completely wrong.
Anytime you tell yourself, I think I know everything, you're probably incorrect.
Yeah. But I was, I hadn't even hit 4 years on my first contract. By the time I graduated BRC, I was like 3.5, 3 3/4. So I was a cocky little shit. And
that's crazy. Your first contract, you've done 2 deployments, and now you finished BRC.
Yeah,
that's insane.
So
man.
I had a awesome start to my career in the Marine Corps.
It sounds that way.
Yeah, and one of the guys that I was going through this whole process with, he hit his 2-year mark in the Marine Corps in BRC. And I remember that summer we were in free fall school and he was complaining about something. And I was like, dude, you need to shut the hell up. I'm like, you are barely 2 years in the Marine Corps. You're an NCO. You're a member of First Force Reconnaissance Company. And we're in free fall school. Like, we're corporals in free fall school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and we've already done airborne and dive and SERE. Like, we're going to leave here already we haven't even started our careers as reconnaissance Marines, and we're already dual cool, like fully insert qualified.
You're doing all the cool stuff that people see on the commercials, and that's like what drives them to even join the military.
Yeah, I was like, we have it made in the shade for the rest of our careers. Like, we get to be the thing that we wanted to be.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, so, but yeah, I was super lucky. Whereas, so that was my experience, BRC, and then I did all my schools. And again, I got super lucky because I got pipelined SERE, pre-dive, dive, airborne, free fall, all straight through. Before I got, I started with my very first platoon in Recon. So that's
not really that common, right? To be able to knock out all those schools and one after the other.
It sure as hell wasn't back then, and it still wasn't very typical for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Now things have changed. Even since I spent 4 years as an instructor at Recon Training Company, and even since I was there, things have changed. So now we have a Recon contract. So people that want to join from off the street, you can join for Recon. I think there's some kind of a screener process. I've talked to some guys about it, but you can join, you can get Recon contract. And if you're a Recon contract, you go through MCT instead of Infantry Training Battalion, you go through Marine Combat Training. Pretty sure you can still volunteer. I think they stopped the volunteer process for a little bit because of COVID, but I think we're past that. So I'm pretty sure the guys in infantry training battalion can volunteer as well from infantry training battalion.
Real quick, why would they go, if you're a contract recon Marine, why are you going to MCT rather than SOI to the ITB, the infantry training battalion?
So we fought that one when I was an instructor there. They brought that up, and we fought that because if you didn't show up with like the 0311 rifleman infantry skills, you would have a harder time. The way we looked at it is learning. You didn't have enough grounding in the basics to learn ground recon patrolling and everything else. But the argument was made that if they just go through MCT, they get to recon training companies sooner. And since, ground recon patrolling, although a lot of the same principles apply, is different than a movement to contact, the combat type patrols that are more taught at infantry training battalion, that we're really not losing anything, but we're gaining time because they're only there on 5-year contracts and guys get hurt. When I checked in, there was I think he was a Lance Corporal at the time. He'd already been there for almost a year. He spent a little over 3 years at recon training company as a roper because he kept getting hurt.
Ah, damn.
And he would get hurt. He would get dropped from BRC. He would be put on light duty. And like, as soon as he was off light duty, he just got thrown back into another class. And so he just kept re-aggravating the same injury. And I think at first it was his knee, and then it became knee and ankle because he was trying to compensate for the weak knee. And finally, it was like, dude, you have to send this guy to the fleet. Like, we cannot keep a Marine here for his entire enlistment. You have to send him to the fleet.
Yeah, so never even make it out of the school. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So he did get sent to the fleet, and his younger brother came through maybe like a year and a half later. And I was talking to him, and he said his older brother did make it into the battalion sniper platoon.
That's cool.
So
that's awesome.
He had a for him.
Man, that's got to be tough. Did his younger brother make it through BRC?
He did.
Oh,
he did. On the first try.
Oh, the shit talking at that house has got to be out of control.
I asked him, I was like, hey, man, I don't want to jinx it because, but you're in the final phase. You haven't recycled. Are you going to talk shit to your brother? I'm like, technically, you could recycle like 3 times and still make it through before your brother did. I'm like, you're going to talk a little bit of shit? He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, it's okay to do it a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit. Yeah, he was a good dude. So I'm sure it was a little bit, but I don't know. I haven't run into either of them since.
So if there's a kid on the street right now that wants to join Recon, or even let's say a Lance Corporal that's trying to get over there, what kind of advice do you have for them to prepare for Basic Reconnaissance Course today? Like today's Basic Reconnaissance Course, how should they prepare for that, and what can they do to get ready? Like what resources are there to get ready for something like that?
So I get that question all the time on Instagram, and basically what I tell guys is look at triathlon training programs and powerlifting programs. I also recommend Softly. Like if you don't mind paying, you can check out Softly, and they will guaranteed have a program for you. But the reason I say triathlon is, that's endurance. It's the running that you're going to need to do. It's the swimming you're going to need to be able to do. And yeah, there's biking in a triathlon, so you could drop that. But the good thing about the biking is that's, good endurance that's low impact. Yeah. So if you have a bike and a means of a place to bike, or if you just want to use one in a gym, that's fine. But definitely the running and swimming aspect are huge. And obviously a triathlon is an endurance event, and that's basically what Basic Recon is. And that's what life in this type of job is. It's just one long endurance event. So I recommend that they look that up. And then the reason I say the powerlifting is you need to be strong. You can't just be a fast runner and just a fast swimmer. You have to be strong because you're going to put weight on your body and you're going to move around. And, eventually if you find yourself in combat, bad things happen, and you may have to pick somebody else up and move them.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be strong to do that. One of the mission sets that we do, limited scale raids, you may have to go hands-on with somebody that opposes you. And if you're just a little Speedy Gonzalez runner, but you can barely bench press your own body weight or deadlift your own body weight, you're not going to be able to push around another individual.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so complex movements, get strong, get fast, get the endurance, and absolutely be smart about it. You don't need to thrash yourself in a way that you think you'll be thrashed in the course, because the instructors will handle that.
Yeah.
That's what they're there for. They're there to test you.
Yeah.
You go out and destroy yourself to try and prove how tough you are now. You have a higher chance of injuring yourself and then destroying your chances before you even start.
Yeah.
So it's like, train smart, plenty of rest, fuel yourself, and, you know, proper sleep, like proper recovery, whole 9 yards. And that's why I recommend they go out and they look at these programs, and I recommend Softly, because I know Softly can program this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they have a lot of specific programs for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know any like true specific programs, and I'm hesitant to say like you need to follow this exact program, because I'm not a professional. You know, I can say, if people ask like, hey, you know, what do you like to do when you go swimming? You're like, all right, well, I like to do this. I've got bad knees, so I don't do long distance runs, but I do some sprints and I do this other stuff. But, you know, that's me where I'm at now, just trying to maintain.
What are some like target times that prospective, you know, BRC candidates should be looking at for like maybe their run time or swim time for like you said, you know, the 2K open water swim. What are some kind of times that guys need to be shooting for to properly be prepared? You know,
so for open waters, for the open water swims, the general standard for both BRC and pretty sure still for dive school, with combat equipment, is maintaining 15-minute pace or better every 500 meters, which comes out to a 2K in 1 hour. So that's a standard. You know, if you have the ability to get some fins, that's definitely a good idea to get fins and start working that, because you will work muscles you were not aware could be worked when you start finning. But if you don't, it's not the end of the day, because you will get trained how to do that when you check in a recon training company. For, you know, runs, you need to be able to obviously not just pass a Marine Corps PFT with a first class, but you want to shoot for a high first class. So as far as the run time goes, if you can run in 20:30 or better, you're good.
For 3 miles.
For the 3 miles. Yeah. The closer you get to a perfect score of 18, awesome. But I would chastise students that cross the finish line and start puking their guts out. I was like, cool, now we have to go to the pool. You just puked up all your electrolytes and half your fluids.
Yeah. Yeah, there was no reason to go all the way, out for that.
You did all that to run a 17:30 when you could have just run a 19:30 and still had the energy in the tank to get to the pool and survive in the pool.
Yeah. That comes back to that triathlon or marathon mindset. It's not a sprint, you know.
Exactly. You know, like, give it what you've got, but you have to have more. If you hit empty before the day is done, you're screwed. Mm-hmm. And those are the guys that end up quitting. Those are the guys that tap out. Their tank reaches empty, you know, halfway through the day, 3/4 of the way through the day, and they can't see the end in sight, and they quit. So you really do need to maintain that. And to a point, like, you can not quit, but if you hit empty and we're in the water and you go under, we pull you out, we put you on the side, corpsman looks at you, we put you on oxygen, and you're okay. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the determination is that medically you are safe to get back in the water, and you get back in the water, and then you do it again. You're probably going to get dropped from training at that point. Yeah. Like, so even if you don't quit, if you're not prepared enough and your body is quitting on you because you didn't prepare, you can also find yourself on the outside. So that preparation is huge.
Yeah, I know a lot of people would probably look at that like, man, I didn't quit. Why are they making me drop? But I mean, it's even while I was at like Los Flores, I remember a BRC candidate drowning in the pool. Like things like that happen, and that's like kind of the thing you guys have to keep an eye out for too. Is like, is this guy is he completely spent? Is he gonna make it through the rest of the day? I don't know how many guys at one time you're watching in a pool and stuff like that, but it's like, I don't know. There's real world consequences for not being ready.
Yeah, and that is the other part of it too. Yeah, it's not just the fact that you keep going in the water, but the fact that if you keep going down, and we have to keep pulling you up, that means there's more eyes on you and fewer eyes on everybody else in the water.
Yeah,
and that's how some of those have happened. The most recent death at RTC, it's been a while now. I think it was 2014. But that's basically how that happened. Is there were so many people in the water and so many people struggling that the cadre were looking at other people that were freaking out and panicking, and this other guy that was calm on the surface and just went under. And by the time they got to him, got him out of the water, he died of the story I got was dry land drowning. So he just had too much water in his lungs. And then I think I also heard he had a heart condition that he had hidden from the Marine Corps, which contributed to it. But that's something we look at too. I was a staff member there for 4 years. So if you're a hazard, we sit you down. Same thing now. I run a CQB course. If you're a hazard, I'm not going to let you come back in the house with live ammunition and explosives if you're pointing your gun at the good guys. If you're dropping flashbangs at people's feet, I'm not going to keep giving you flashbangs. Like if you are taking too much of our time and attention that we can't train the rest of the group, then you're a detriment to the group.
Yeah.
And that's a big lesson for, I think, people need to realize, like, coming to Marine Corps, but especially coming to Recon, the group is more important than the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Every time, 10 out of 10. As a leader, I will do everything I can to help everybody in my charge. As an instructor, I will do everything I can to help every student I have. But if you are a detriment to the group, you are dragging down the team, you're dragging down the class, I will cut you away. Yeah. If you can't learn or you won't learn, I will cut you away so that the people who are putting forth the effort or have the ability to learn and contribute can.
Yeah, there's a minimum level of competency that you're expecting, for I don't know. I guess unless you've never been around that kind of community or that kind of world, it's hard to like, I don't know. These lessons are learned or written in blood, like these aren't just for fun. Some of the reasons that you guys, I don't know, train the way you do or cut people for the reasons you do, there's a reason for it. And like you said, the whole thing is to protect that team and make sure you give the best chance to get in it, to do the mission successfully and get out alive. And there's just no room, for, I don't know, there's just no room for error in a situation like that, and I think that's hard for anyone that's never been in a like combat situation or a unit that's like a small unit that's doing these not normal kind of missions and raids and stuff like that. It may be hard for them to understand that. It's not like you work at IPAC, and if you suck at being, an IPAC dude, we can put you on a different desk and you'll just still work there. It's just not the same. The consequences are far greater.
Yeah, it's one of the issues that we had. So when we consolidated the Basic Recon course, used to operate exclusively out of Coronado, California, and then ARS, I forget exactly where they were. But we consolidated both those schools on the West Coast under SY West to make what is now Recon Training Company. And I'm sure it still is for those guys. It was a constant battle with the command at SOI West and with TCOM about our drop rate, because we're in a weird, we're not quite an entry level. We're not considered an entry level course because we fall under advanced infantry training, but we are entry level.
Yeah.
So it's weird, but
I know what you're saying. You're entry level for that field, but you're not entry level for the Marine Corps.
Yeah. So, but because we are kind of entry level, the other entry level courses they have is Marine Combat Training and Infantry Training Battalion, and those are like everyone graduates.
Yeah.
That's what they're meant for. They're meant for everyone to pass through. And there were instances while I was there where like they were passing people that were actually failing, but that's here nor there. So that's the mindset: is everyone graduates, everyone gets a participation trophy, everyone graduates, moves on. So when we start with 70 students and we graduate 15, people are like, "What the hell are you guys doing? You can't do that." And we're like, "Well, we can." Because we have these standards.
Yeah.
And those other individuals did not meet the standard.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how it goes.
Standards are becoming the new, flashpoint in the military right now with everything shifting. Did you see right now, I just saw yesterday a headline that the Army is now thinking about getting rid of the ACFT or whatever it's called, their fitness test that they just implemented. And changing it back to based on gender rather than being gender neutral, because I want to say the statistic was like 60% of the females failed the ACFT and stuff like that. I think it's ACFT anyways, but it's like these standards are here for a reason. Like people are building standards out because like combat's a real thing, people getting shot and having to be carried off the battlefield's a real thing. Lugging around a fucking sasser is a real thing. That's a 30-pound weapon on top of the other, like probably 50 or 60 pounds that you're carrying already. There's a reason for some of these standards. And I think you see a lot of like push on the political side to kind of loosen these standards a little bit, for whatever reason or another. I'm kind of glad I'm out and I'm not having to deal with it, but.
Yeah, I don't know. It is, difficult. I mean, the Marine Corps went through its transition to bring females away from the flexed arm hang to pull-ups.
Mm-hmm.
And I know my wife was freaking out. She's like, I've never done a pull-up before. I can't do a pull-up.
Oh, your wife's in the Marines?
She is.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know.
She was slaying it on the female PFT because everyone gets crunches. Even if you don't get crunches, you should say you got the crunches, right? And she has a flexed arm hang, which the flexed arm hang, you didn't have to keep your chin over the bar. You just couldn't let your arm lock out.
Yeah.
And then their 100 points for a run time, I think it was like 21 minutes, so it's slower than the male time. And she was able to smash PFTs off that standard. And they're like, okay, we're going to transition to pull-ups to make it more gender neutral. And she's like, shit. So we had one of the pull-up bars that goes in a door frame.
Yep.
And some resistance bands so she could help. It was like every morning I would spot her one pull-up, and every night one pull-up, and then we tried to make that 2, and then like her sergeant major took her to the gym and put her on one of the pull-up assist machines.
Yeah.
Made her do like 100 pull-ups, and she got rhabdo, and it was a mess. And I was nervous for her because like we just need to get you to the minimum, which I think was like 3. Like if you can do 3 pull-ups, like you're gonna have a couple of crappy PFTs, but we can at least get you there.
That's a good starting point.
And then we'll just keep building, right? Mm-hmm. We'll just keep building. Like we'll get through it. But then the Marine Corps was like, they were looking at the data and they're like, okay, we're gonna lose like 60% of our females if we institute this now. That was like 2013, 14, 15, somewhere in there.
Like 15, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so they were like, all right, we're going to delay the pull-ups being required for women. So they had the option.
Yep, I remember that.
Of pull-ups or flexed arm hang. And then I think in like 17 is when the push-up option came out for everybody.
But the push-up option, with that, you can't even get a top score, right? You can only max out at like 70 points rather than 100. Isn't that something like that? Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, for her, like she can do push-ups. She's still not good at pull-ups, so she's like, "Screw it! I'll just I'll take the 70 points and get the rest of my points on the run and the crunches. And now, like, we're both at the end of our career, so she's like, I'll take a low first class, whatever.
Whatever. You're still gonna retire. Yeah. It's
it's still good enough for her.
It's an interesting dynamic, because you want to. For me, I was an MLG. I was a mechanic when I first came in, and I worked around a lot of females, and there were good ones and there were shitty ones that didn't do anything. Just like there's good dudes and there's shitty dudes that don't do anything and stuff like that. I think the whole argument of there's a lot of female Marines that you hear talk about how they don't get enough respect in the military, or that their service is downgraded because they're females and stuff like that. And I just don't think that's ever going to change until the standards are exactly the same. Because a guy doing 17 pull-ups and getting less than 100 points on, less than 100 points for his score, seeing a female do 5 pull-ups and getting a higher score than him, there's always going to be that bitterness, especially because that counts towards promotions and stuff like that. And that's kind of a weird dynamic you're in, because your wife is actually, a female Marine. So I don't know what your take on that is, or if you agree or disagree with that statement, but I think it's a tough conversation that the military is going to be having for the next couple of years.
Yeah. I think the gender neutral standard is important. I also think it's much harder for most women to gain and maintain. Yeah. Can it be done? Sure. Like look at the CrossFit games. Mm-hmm. There's tons of women just kicking ass in CrossFit games. But typically, that's not your average service member, right? For on either side, male or female, aren't these studs. And I think part of it is also just the general culture. I don't think we have a good program that encourages, true fitness. Everyone's like, go run, just go run. Yeah. Or if you want to be better at pull-ups, just go do pull-ups.
Just go do pull-ups.
But if you have someone who's like, I can't do a pull-up, I don't know how to do a pull-up, maybe they just don't understand like what muscles they're meant to be recruiting, the mechanics of it, and there's not a good program. Like you can't walk into any gym in the Marine Corps and there's a bunch of specialists like standing by to like help you out. Some gyms there are, but that's not every gym. And there might be some dude in boots and utes with a Semper Fit t-shirt on. That doesn't mean he's a fitness guru. He's just stuck there because, somebody wanted him there, not in their hair.
Gym tech.
It's not necessarily because he's a guru that can assist you. So I think that's something that, like, if we really want this thing, we got to make a huge culture shift in how we look at fitness, because it is more than just go run, just go lift.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's what's your recovery? How are you fueling yourself? What is the rest? We want to like smash ourselves when we go to the field because that's, combat conditions. But if I can afford my platoon or my company to get 8 hours of rest after a hard day of training in the field, yeah, maybe we're sleeping in the field and it's going to rain on us in our bivy sacks. But if I can give everybody 8 hours, I should try to actually do that.
Get that recovery period in, yeah.
And then, yeah, absolutely, like, go to the field and, like, there is no bivouac. There is no 8 hours. We are simulating continuous combat operations, and you're going to find sleep where you get it because you got to be tested. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to do that every single thing you do.
Yeah. Do you think, as I was getting out, the force fitness instructors were being implemented, and it seems like that was kind of the Marine Corps' first step into professionalizing the like fitness side of the military, or the Marine Corps specifically? Like you said, like, back in the day, it was like, all right, get up, go PT. We're going to go for a 4 mile run. We're going to go for a 5 mile run, do some pull-ups, some sit-ups, and then shower and go to work. And it was like run every day, run. And depending on who you're running with, you're either running 5 miles at a whatever pace or 3 miles or whatever, it was all different, but none of it was like focused. Is having the force fitness instructors implemented in different units and stuff like that helping that? Do you think that's helping educate leadership on like better recovery tactics or better, even warm up, because I know we went from doing our daily dozen to they started doing like dynamic warm ups, like the inchworm and all that stuff.
I don't know. I haven't had a force fitness instructor in any of my units yet.
I guess you guys don't really need one over at Recon, huh?
Well, I mean, I was at Recon Battalion, and before I came over here to EOTG on the East Coast, and we didn't have one there, and we sure as hell don't have one at EOTG. I haven't heard, if they're making a difference, it's not enough that people are raving about it, because I don't hear anybody, the Lance Corporal Underground, murmuring about, their force fitness instructors. And from the body types that I'm seeing show up to courses, I would say that there's not much of an impact if they're out there. Yeah, it's a major, it's a really big thing that like we got to address. And I do think part of it is the culture outside the military. Yeah. If the culture outside the military doesn't value fitness, wellness, and health as much, when you come in, you're not a really different person when you finish boot camp. You're the same person with a different hairstyle and different lingo, but your general attitudes and mannerisms kind of stay the same. So
your brainwash, period is going to wash, kind of fade away after a little bit.
Yeah, so we just definitely have to do better at that. But then, on the outside, like, also need to promote it. And it's kind of a circle where it's like, if we can do a better job in the military, and then our members leave, and instead of being broken down, they're, a little worse for wear, but still capable and have routines and understand fitness and wellness, right? Because I can be strong as hell, but still out of shape. Mm-hmm. That goes back into the civilian sector, and you have all these veterans getting out, and they're in shape, and they promote that, and maybe just by being who they are, and they go in like, Bob or Jill is always in great shape, and they're always in a good mood because they're not depressed because they're out of shape. That's something that can then spark, hopefully within the civilian community. But obviously we can't do anything about that, right? That's, we can do our best to influence, but within the military, we can definitely change some things culturally to make it more important and
overall more effective and stuff.
And, the better that we can take care of ourselves and our people, the more you get out of us. From a business standpoint for the DoD, it's like, if you take a piece of gear and you smash it with a hammer, you don't have that piece of gear for very long, and then you got to pay for a new one. But if you care for that piece of gear and you maintain it, then it lasts longer and it does more for you. Your dollar goes farther. So it's definitely within the interest, I would think, of the DoD to really look into that and how that's promoted.
Yeah, for sure, man. All right, dude, we're coming up on 2 hours, so we'll probably go ahead and wrap it up. I'd like to. What we'll do is at some point we'll try to do another live stream down the road and get into your actual time on a team over at Recon and maybe some of those deployments and stuff, and we'll get this technical issue fixed and do a live stream so people can jump on and ask some questions, because I know they always have questions about that. Is there anything else that you want to go over before we cut this off?
Yeah, I'll just say, so didn't really get to it. So the whole BRC Recon process is different. If you're coming off the street, you can go in contract, and you go in and you go to Recon Training Company, you're taken care of. If you're already in the fleet and you want to lateral move to 0321, the first person you really need to talk to is your career planner. Mm-hmm. Now, you may need to talk to your immediate supervisor, platoon sergeant, section head, whatever. Like, hey, I need to go talk to the career planner. Go talk to the career planner and let them know your intentions as soon as possible, and they will be able to give you the information that you need from there. You might need to spend more time in the fleet before you're eligible. They'll tell you that. They'll let you know. But work with the career planners. Work with them. Talk with them. There is also a recruiter for Recon on each coast. There's one on the East Coast and West Coast. your career planner should have their contact information and can reach out to them. If you're overseas, like Okinawa or MSG or something like that, and that's what you want to do, just reach out, through your career planner or through your staff in COIC, reach out to either of the recon recruiters. You can find their information on Instagram through the Basic Recon page, and they'll help you what steps you need to take. And there'll be some paperwork you have to fill out and all that, but get all that done, hit your minimum requirements. If you don't have the right PFT, train up, run the right PFT, get it in the system. If you don't have a high enough swim qual, go get your swim qual knocked out, get it in the system, just get the wickets done, prepare yourself, and then you will check in to Recon Training Company. And then from there, it's a whole process. They build you up to go on to the next level and get into BRC and go through the basic recon course. And then for the lateral movers, when you graduate BRC, you will go back to your unit, and you will have to then get your orders to whatever recon unit and do a full checkout and either a PCA or a PCS move to that unit.
Yeah.
So it's not as simple as just you graduate BRC and you get to check into a recon battalion. You're gonna have to go back to your unit, which for some of us,
sucks. Huh?
I didn't want to do that.
Yeah. I think that
I didn't have to, fortunately.
Yeah, I think that you're good. I think the Basic Reconnaissance Course Instagram page is really good because not only do I see them announce the screeners all the time, but they're showing video of the actual course of guys actually going through it. It's kind of a little taste of what you can expect when you get there. So it's definitely, if people haven't checked that out, definitely jump on their page because I see the screener announcements all the time on there. So that's definitely a good resource for that.
It's an amazing program now. Anybody who goes to that program, you'll be a far better trained 0321 than I was when I finished BRC. It's a great program.
That's awesome, man. That's all you can ask for, I guess, All right, man. Well, hey, thanks again for coming on. Sorry for the technical issues at the beginning. Like I said, we'll figure that out. We'll get a live stream going at some point. For those that are out there, make sure to check out my Instagram at Former Action Guys and at J Kramer Graphics. My website's jkramergraphics.com. Blake's Instagram is Blakewater0326 on Instagram. Make sure to check his page out. Dude, you got a ton of cool gear stuff and everything like that. I hope at some point you decide to start a YouTube channel and kind of go through the practical application of this stuff and everything. And if you do that, let me know, and we'll definitely have you come on and talk more about that.
It may be in the works.
Sounds good, man. All right. Well,
thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, no problem, man. Have yourself a good day and good rest of the week.
You too. All right. Thanks.
Later.